There's a new human rights bill for Scotland being proposed. It sounds completely innocuous. Human rights are about justice. They're about respecting people's dignity. But more importantly, they're about holding power to account. Or are they about enforcing compliance with a healthy environment? Or enforcing compliance with health in general? Or about forcing compliance with sustainable food? I've been going through the public consultation for this bill, and this seems to be exactly what it's proposing: compliance with concepts that are widely open to interpretation and quite vague. These so-called rights are very different from human rights. They are not inviolable or inalienable. They are not natural or God-given. Rather than holding power to account, they could be used by people in power as levers of control. I don't know whether this human rights bill that's proposed applies just to Scotland. I think similar human rights bills may have gone through in other countries, or they might be going through at the moment, because the framework for this bill seems to have come down from the United Nations. Certainly where this bill's concerned, the public consultation appears to be very manipulative. It appears to conflate human rights with so-called rights to a healthy environment or sustainable food, which are not really rights. They're important, they're values or ideals, but they're not God-given rights in the way that the right to life or the right to religious freedom are rights. But in putting all these so-called rights together in a human rights bill, it puts rights to sustainable food or a healthy environment on the same footing as rights to equality or religious freedom or the right to life. So in a way, it suggests that if you argue that a healthy environment is not an actual right, it appears that you're saying, well, I don't want a healthy environment. And in that respect, it seems quite manipulative. It's often pointed out that human rights are not things that are just made up by law or justice. They are God-given or natural. They exist. And the whole point of human rights is to hold power to account. In effect, human rights are a statement of the boundaries beyond which authority must not and cannot overstep. People in power can't just suddenly start killing people for their religion or race. If they did, there would be an uprising. So, human rights are in effect a declaration of where the boundaries of power lie. They're a statement of consent to government. So how does the United Nations come into this? Well, the United Nations introduced a category of rights known as economic, social and cultural rights in a treaty that Britain agreed, or the UK agreed to, in 1976. And more recently, the UN introduced minimum core obligations, which are part of something called progressive realisation, which is designed really to be a kind of benchmark that governments have to adhere to in their imposition of these economic, social and cultural rights. So this is where the compliance starts to come in. And apparently from what I've read, minimum core obligations have been quite controversial. Economic, social and cultural rights include the right to adequate food, the right to adequate housing, to education, to health, to social security, and to take part in cultural life, to water and sanitation, and to work. So these are all laudable aims, but very different from core human rights. They're not so much about holding power to account. They're really ideals to be worked towards, values, important, but they're not God-given rights. Some of them might be. I mean, if you can't have water, then you can't have life, obviously. But they are, some of these categories are quite wide open to interpretation, and therefore they could be used in different ways. They're not just something that holds power to account. They could be used as levers to control people. For example, who decides what adequate food is? Who decides what adequate housing is? Who decides what even education is? As an example, Money is one of the most important aspects of modern life, and yet financial education isn't on the curriculum in the UK anyway. Another example is social security. This is not a right, and governments don't see it as a right. They don't treat it as a right. And no amount of progressive realisation or minimum core obligations is going to change that. Social security is only available if you can prove that you have no other means of making a living. I'm not arguing the rights or the wrongs of this. I'm just saying that it's a fact. That's the way it is, and that's the way it always has been. Social security is not a right in any sense, but it is often used as a lever of social control. As an example, when I was made redundant in 2009 after having been bullied and yelled and screamed at by my boss at the time, I chose not to take any state benefits, because in order to do so, I would have had to take on a job well below my skill level and where I might have been yelled and bullied again. And I just felt too traumatised to go through that again. I was also astonished at the poor quality of career and business advice available at the time. The safety net that I thought I'd been paying as part of my taxes for the past 20 years wasn't actually there in reality. Luckily, I had savings and a supportive family. Other people don't have that. It showed me that social security really is a lever of control, designed to get people into poorly paying jobs that no one else wants to do. You can argue about the rights and wrongs of it, but what is clear is that social security is not being progressively realised as a right of any kind. It's a lever of control. This is why I'm against universal basic income, because it would almost certainly be used as a lever of control, probably to push people into accepting digital ID and a central bank digital currency. So this human rights bill for Scotland appears to me to be very manipulative and deeply concerning. What the Scottish Government appears to be trying to do is to repackage economic, social and cultural rights to put them on the same footing as core human rights, almost as an attempt to give them a kind of emotive power. Human dignity is referred to repeatedly in this bill, as is the convention, the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child. And these are hugely important concepts, hugely emotive, as they should be. But to put those on the same footing as the right to a healthy environment, so-called right to a healthy environment, or to sustainable food, that could be widely open to interpretation in many different ways. It strikes me as potentially quite insidious. It distorts the whole concept of human rights. It doesn't mean that these other types of so-called rights are not important, but they are being conflated in a way that to me could be quite dangerous. Human rights cannot be worked towards. You don't work towards not killing someone. You don't work towards giving someone religious freedom. I think it's important to look at what human rights really are. It's so important to have a good understanding of this, so that the emotive power of human rights is not used to effectively give the government power in areas which are quite unclear, such as a healthy environment or sustainable food. I really hope this bill doesn't get through. If you're in Scotland, please note that the public consultation for this human rights so-called bill closes on the 5th of October 2023. So you've got less than a month now to put in your thoughts. Thanks for watching.